All, Jonalee here, and in today's session, we will explore rote counting with decimals. I want to give a little bit of background. There are 4 steps to improving number sense. Number sense is the understanding of number. Number sense is understanding the quantity of number, the value, the magnitude. Magnitude just means how large or small numbers are, where numbers are placed on the number line. Number sense is not, and I'm going to define this just for the purpose of these videos, but number sense is not procedures, algorithms, step-by-step recipes. So we're going to separate those procedural algorithmic things for other videos. This video and the rote counting and improving number sense process is all about gaining a conceptual understanding, an innate intuitive understanding of numbers and how large and small numbers are. In a sense, that's what the definition of number sense is. So we are going to look at how rote counting, specifically with decimals, is going to lead us to that improvement in number sense. So when we think about toddlers rote count without meaning all the time. 2, 4, 6, 8, who do we appreciate? They know how to skip count by tens, a lot of them, especially by kindergarten, first grade, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. But they may not understand the quantity or value of those numbers, and that's okay. Rote counting is the first step in a process that has 4 steps. We're not going to talk about all 4 steps today, but this 4-step process is called the numeracy cycle. The numeracy cycle is exactly how it's named. It's a cycle that we continue to use as we move through different types of numbers. The reason we're going to focus today on rote counting with decimals is we often don't default back to the first step, which is rote counting of the numeracy cycle, when we enter other rational numbers, such as looking at fractions between 0 and 1, fractions that are parts of numbers, and decimals. We typically only look at rote counting with whole numbers or when kids are younger. But by the time kids get to 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and even beyond, it's essential to keep that first step in improving number sense, rote counting very strong with all of these other number categories and number systems. So let me tell you the 4 steps to the numeracy cycle, and we are only going to focus on the first step in this video, and we're only going to focus on the decimals. So we're really drilling down deep in this video. So the 4 steps of the numeracy cycle is number 1, counting, meaning just rote counting without meaning, which is going to lead us to number 2, which is understanding quantity, value, and magnitude, how large or small numbers are. Rote counting is the foundation for that. So if we have students who are struggling with fraction, decimal, percent, they probably need intervention with rote counting with those numbers. Step number 3 is comparing. So now in step number 2, when I understand how large or small numbers are, now I want to be able to compare 2 or more different numbers. And finally, number 4, being able to operate. Those are the 4 steps, the 4 stages in the numeracy cycle. Today's session, we're going to focus on the first, which is rote counting, which is absolutely essential for improving number sense. And we're going to look at decimals. So let's suppose for a moment we're looking at the value of money. So time and money are very abstract concepts, and time and money are 2 concepts that students often struggle with as they go through secondary. They are things that we experience every single day, but when we have a weak number sense, it's very difficult to grasp understanding of time and money. So what I like to do is I like to use time and money as the experiences that I give students, so I can get 2 impacts at the same time. One, I can improve number sense, so just their everyday understanding of number, but number 2, I can also improve their understandings of time and money. So I'm going to give us a scenario, a situation, and I'm going to call this situation or this scenario a stimulus. A stimulus is something that's going to stimulate mathematical thinking. A stimulus, I get rid of the noise, not the noise we hear, but too much additional information that takes away from students really trying to make sense of the situation. A stimulus can be a number, an equation, it can be a video, it can be a picture, anything that's going to stimulate mathematical thinking and stimulate sense making. The other piece that I need to remember with the stimulus is I'm going to remove the questions. So I want to remove any question or prompt that's going to force students into solving. I don't want them to solve, I want them to make sense. So I'm going to start with a stimulus, and then I'm going to move to the I'm going to start with the sense making, and then I'm going to move to the solving as we go through the experience. So here we go. Tell me about, and those are my favorite 3 words, tell me about this number. So I can get lots of perspective from students. And the other thing that we often make the mistake of when we are instructing mathematics is not gaining enough student perspective. So the reason I'm even starting this session or this experience with a stimulus is so that you all can kind of think what the students might be going through as I'm asking us to sense make. So I'm just going to use my favorite 3 words, tell me about this number. So kiddos might say, well, there are 0 holes. You know, it's between 0 and 1. This is where it might be on the number line. It's less than a half. Some students might say it's more than a half. So you're going to get a lot of responses from students. But I want to move away from that, and I don't want to spend too much time on that. I do spend a lot of time on that with my students, but I'm going to move away from that to get to this idea of rote counting with decimals and how important this rote counting is and how we can extract the student thinking of decimals through rote counting. So I'm going to, after I get the student's perspective, I'm going to take them through an experience of what this number is. So if I say that this number is 12 cents, I can write 12 cents like this, 12 cents with the cents symbol. And this is based on the state's money, dollar, cents system. So you'll have to figure out, if you're in a different country, how this kind of relates and interprets, how your language is similar or different than the way that numbers are written and the base 10 system. So 12 cents, when we're dealing with dollars, would be written at like this. I often ask students, where is the decimal on this number with this symbol? That is a confusing question. That is actually a huge misconception for students. They want the decimal to be here. But if I don't write the decimal on a number, it's invisible. It's actually here. So if I use the cent sign, this is how I would write 12 cents. So what symbol would I have to use here with this decimal? I would have to use the dollar symbol because it's 12 100ths of a dollar. Now, I could also extend and I could say, does anybody know how to write this as a fraction? I can go into kind of a side lesson there, or I can save that for another day. But I want to, whenever I'm giving kids an experience with something, I want to extract as much perspective from them as possible. I can do a lot of assessment through this experience, but I also want to instruct at the same time. Sometimes I call it instructment. I'm instructing and assessing at the same time. And I want to leave some unfinished things that we're going to come back to. I don't want to finish every single thing. I want to leave some things out there because my point of this session in this video is to focus on rote counting with decimals. And again, rote counting is the foundation of improving number sense and understanding the value and magnitude of numbers. So if this is 12 cents or 12 100ths, this would mean I have 12 pennies out of 100. So lots of meaning with this, won't spend a lot of time on it. But I want to get to 13 cents. I want to get to 13 cents. So I want to get to this number. Now, if I'm counting by hundredths, I would count 12 100ths, 13 100ths, 14 100ths, 15 100ths, 16 100ths. And I want students to engage in these rote exercises without any understanding of meaning at all. Again, if we go back to that toddler's example, we want kids to have a lot of experience, and they have had a lot of experience rote counting with whole numbers. And a lot of times that's why kids have a better understanding of whole numbers than they do fraction and decimal and parts of numbers. So what I'm going to ask kids to do here, though, instead of counting by hundredths, I'm going to ask students to count by thousandths. Now, there's another segment that I like to teach, and I'm going to put this off to the side here, off to the side, and that is 120 chart. 120 chart. So you can look up 120 chart. It should be another video close to this one that you found. But 120 chart is actually sort of a pre-lesson for this. It doesn't have to be. It's all chicken and egg. You can do whichever one first. But out of the 120 chart, we end up getting to this place where we want to know how to count by thousandths from 1200ths to 1300ths. So how would we do that? What would that look like? Well, how many thousandths do we have in 12 100ths? How many thousandths is that? Now, here's a really great question. 12 100ths is actually the same as 120 thousandths. So what I might say to my students is, don't worry about why. Don't worry about why. We're going to put that 0, and it's not going to change the value of this. Maybe I want to go into another lesson on another day about why those are equivalent. But right now, I just want them to just look at this pattern today. So I've got 120 thousandths. So what would we think might come? Because we actually want to get to 1300ths. Well, how many thousandths would that be? Well, that's going to be 130 thousandths. So let's look at just the numbers 120, 130. How would you count from 120 to 130? And most of our students, fourth, fifth, sixth grade and beyond, they're not going to have any trouble with that. And they're going to say, oh, well, I'm just going to count 121, 122, 123, and give me a moment to write these down. I'm going to try to fit them all in, but I may not have given myself enough space, and that's okay. You'll get the idea. 128, 129, 130. So if I'm looking at this, well, really, those are all decimal numbers with 0 wholes. And I didn't write that as well as I should, but you get the idea. So if I want students to rote count 120 thousandths, 121 thousandths, 122 thousandths, 123 thousandths, and so forth and so on, we can count forwards and backwards by thousandths. And that is going to be how I build that pattern for rote counting. Now, why do we care? Why do we care? Because in the numeracy cycle, in order to improve number sense, this is the first step. So remember, the 4 steps are rote counting, quantify, so count, quantify, compare, operate. Most of the time at the secondary level and pre-secondary level, we are having students operate, and they might be struggling with decimal fraction operation. Well, if they're struggling with operation, we want to go back to the previous step in the numeracy cycle, and that is comparing. So if I'm adding 2 decimals and they're struggling, maybe I need to compare those 2 decimals to build that number sense. If they're struggling comparing which one is greater, which one is less, I need to go back to, well, how big is one of them? Where is one of them on the number line? But if they're struggling with that understanding of value, quantity, magnitude, how large or small that number is and where it's placed on the number line, I'm going to go back in my intervention program to rote counting. Rote counting in and of itself is going to lead students to understanding the other 3 pieces that we focus so strongly on in our mathematics courses. So this video was on rote counting with decimals. This is one example of how I would do that with my students at grades higher than primary grades. I'm not going to be doing this with my kindergartners or my preschools or my students who are still learning to rote count with whole numbers. This video is on rote counting decimals.